And so I kept running across things that said to start journaling, start documenting, writing things down, because you can get that brain fog. You can get very confused. Everything. You walk away from a 2-hour conversation and you don't even understand what just happened, what was said, let alone try to remember all the words and everything. So I started journaling and I started just documenting everything. And I'm going back and I'm reading through it to get some clarity of, because you start doubting yourself, especially when they get back in that good spot, when they start behaving again. Mm-hmm. Then you're like, okay, maybe they're changing, and so you go back and read and you're like, no, this is, it's very eye-opening, and it keeps you grounded.
Welcome to another episode of Negotiate Your Best Life. Today is it's one of my favorite topics, but it's also why is it one of my favorite topics? I don't know, but it's actually a great topic. We've got Renee Swanson here, and she is one of the most top experts on covert narcissism. She's got an amazing podcast on it. She is a life coach in this topic, and we are going to dive into this topic today. And it's covert narcissists are my least favorite.
Mm-hmm. I understand that completely.
Yes. But yet, they are everywhere. They are everywhere. And we really need to talk about them. And they really inflict the most pain on a lot of people. And I always call them the pearl grabbers. What? Me? I would never. But yet here they are causing so much damage to people. So thank you, Renee, for being here and sharing your pearls of wisdom with us and helping. So I know this is going to help so many people.
You're so welcome, Rebecca. Thank you so much for having me here. It's a privilege and an honor to be here. And I love the work that you do, and the word that you spread, and all the people that you are helping. So thank you so much as well for being on this journey.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. And well, I want to get into where it all started for you. I know you grew up in a church environment, and I think for so many of us, how we end up in the clutches of narcissists is that, we end up starting off being groomed to, be pleasers.
Very much so. And that is my background. I definitely grew up in the church, in a Southern church. My dad's actually a preacher, so we were heavily involved in the church. And in essence, my role through childhood was to take care of everybody, was to please everybody, was to be the perfect Christian, the perfect church disciple, the perfect student in school, it was just expected. It was expected that I would go on and continue spreading the mission from the church. And as such, I took it well. I actually was the perfect candidate for that role. And so I would very much so learned all the people-pleasing skills that set the environment right for me to, end up in a marriage with a narcissistic person, because it didn't even cross my mind that people like this existed. Like, it was not anywhere on my radar at all. And I just fit right into that role of, here's another person in my life that I can please, another person that I can take care of his needs. I didn't realize how big and how heavy the needs were going to be, but it was just another role for me to fill in life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I know, I think we talked about this on when I was a guest on yours. I know for me, my mom was an alcoholic, and I had a great dad, but he was, he expected a lot because he was Asian, he was Chinese. And I think I grew up in an environment where my needs weren't really, it wasn't expected that I would have my needs met. Right.
Well, it wasn't expected that I even had needs.
Yes.
I wasn't even allowed to have emotional needs. So
right.
Yes, a very, very good point. It was, I mean, I remember being taught that I wasn't allowed to be angry because if I was ever angry, it meant that my faith in God wasn't strong enough. I wasn't allowed to worry because it meant my faith in God wasn't strong enough. So the foundation was laid for me to never be free to voice my feelings, especially negative feelings. I wasn't allowed to be frustrated or angry or disappointed. All of those just got quickly pushed away, and none of them were validated. So for me to get validation, I had to be on the positive side of everything. I had to be, helping others to never be angry, and everything has to be great and wonderful. And it was a very happy, clappy type environment.
Yeah, so such a good point. And and I think that that's what happens with people who end up attracting narcissists is you're the caregiver. You're the one
Mhm.
who's you don't really have needs. I mean, and so a narcissist will find their way into your life because you take care of, you handle, you fix, you don't
Yes.
have needs.
Yes. You don't have needs and you don't see a problem with their behavior. Like I didn't see the bullying as bullying. It just didn't cross my mind that way. And at the beginning of the relationship, this is part of what makes covert narcissism, I think, so insidious, is he looked like the great and wonderful person. Like it wasn't the kind of person you're looking at who's the life of the party, the loudmouth, the going out and partying every night and making sure he's got his entourage of people following him. He wasn't like that at all. He
Right.
was a very gentle person. He was very, kind of shy and came across as being a bit insecure and very quick to be generous and kind. He was doing things for, my family and doing things for my friends and was very quick to take care of any needs that I had. Like I remember we were going on a road trip and he was like, hey, let me help pack stuff for you and I can take care of this. And it was actually really kind of nice. I was like, oh wow, this guy's great. And he helped to pack stuff up and he took care of loading the car and everything, whereas in the past that would have been something that I always did, in helping my family. And so at the beginning of the relationship, you don't see at all what's coming down the pike. You really see a kind and generous person. And the world around you supports that. Your family see it that way too. And your friends, they also see this person as being very kind and understanding and compassionate because again, that's the persona that they show.
Yeah, exactly. And so, and it is sort of like this uh proverbial frog in the slow boiling water,
Mhm.
right? You just kind of all of a sudden realize what happened? How did I end up here?
Right.
Because you slowly start to make adjustments in your behavior.
You do. It's like that Bugs Bunny cartoon. There's a Bugs Bunny cartoon with I think it's Yosemite Sam that Bugs draws a line in the sand and says, "I dare you to step over this line." And Yosemite says, "Well, I'm a stepping," and he steps over the line. Well, Bugs just draws another line and he says, "Well, I dare you to step over this line." Well, I'm a stepping. And this line, you just keep creating a new line over and over and over until you find out you've backed right off of a cliff. And so that's what happens is it's that little bit of temperature like what you're talking about with the frog. It just these little shots start coming out of nowhere at you that I mean, I remember the first time with me, it was because I told him he had toothpaste on his mouth. Well, that's a nothing. It should never still be in my memory 20 plus whatever years later it is. But it stood out because his response to it was a 0 to 100 and it didn't match the situation. But that's where you get into the narcissistic injury. This was an injury to him because it was a threat to his image. But I didn't know. Here's me from my side, not knowing anything that was going on. I didn't understand at all where this attack had come from. And so instead, what we do as victims of this is we start a checklist. Well, I'll never tell him he's got toothpaste on his mouth. I'll never move the stapler again. I'll never, leave the car on empty again. I'll never say it that way again. And we just start this checklist down. Like mine was pages and pages and pages long. I didn't know it, but I remember thinking to myself over and over, "Whoa, I'll never bring that topic up again." And so
You're never again list.
it's the never again list. And after, 10, 15 years of living this way, well, you don't have anything left to say to them. You don't have anything left that's safe to talk about. And anything that you do want to talk about or you do want to say, it's just going to get added to the list, again. And so that's kind of the environment I was living in.
Yeah, so mine was the everything became my job sort of a thing. Everything else is optional to the other person. Everything else is my job, right?
Right, right, right. And so it's just you really become convinced. Like so I entered this marriage, divorce was not anywhere on my radar. This was a lifelong marriage. This was, this is my person, and it felt like a match made in heaven. The other thing that happens at the beginning of these relationships is they match everything you ever wanted in life. And so if you want, let's say you like violin music, well, all of a sudden now they're reading about all the violinists and they're buying the CDs. And I've always loved violin music too. They match, all your own hopes, your values, your desires. And so there's some future faking that happens with this. And you get really hooked onto this image of who you think they are. And as that image starts to change, or the first time it ever happened with me, that first instant, I became more, my self-reflective nature really came through of now I know how to self-reflect. So I over self-reflect. I'm like, okay, what could I have done different? I could have said that different. I could have been more gentle with my words. I could have been nicer. And so with the over self-reflecting that we have, it's always true. You could say something different. That's never going to change. But that's what we end up hooking on to inside of us is we really become convinced that we're the problem and that we're not being, nice enough with our words, or that we aren't, being caring enough to their feelings and their needs. And so we kick it into overdrive and we try to fix everything that we possibly can to become the perfect partner for them. And it's just not possible.
Right. The thing is, though, they're never trying to be the perfect person for the other person, right? It's
No,
never
it's not
the other way
reciprocal.
around. It's never
Right.
reciprocal, right? I mean, they're never
Right.
going, "Hey, how can I support you? How can I be better for
Right.
you?" I mean,
Right.
that reflection is never happening on the other side.
Right. Well, and with covert narcissism, especially the more subtle or refined that they get, they actually might even say those words. Well, what can I do to help you? But as soon as you answer that, it's going to get flipped right back in your face. And
Oh,
so
yeah.
the words might even be there.
That's so true. That is so true. As soon as you start to answer them, then it's um now what did you do wrong? How did you? It's
Mhm.
blame shifting, it's projection,
Mhm.
it's deflection, it's anger,
Mhm.
it's
It's
all
goalposts that are moving all the time. You find yourself in a circular conversation from hell. And the first time I read that phrase, I burst into tears. I thought somebody finally gets it. I didn't know what to call it, but I knew that is exactly what I'd been living. These conversations, were 2, 3, 4 hours long over, I moved the stapler on his desk. And as we're looping around in this conversation, and I'm now defending everything I've ever thought or I've said in the past, and even things I didn't say or I didn't do. And they put just enough truth in there to really continue to keep you hooked. Like there might be just enough truth that yes, I did in fact move the stapler. That's all it takes then for this, for them to jump onto that and throw all the blame on you. And so you're looped in these conversations that never get anywhere. You walk away confused. You are not sure. Are we good? Are we not good? You certainly don't feel any better. And
yeah.
reconciliation is long, like that's in another planet.
Oh yeah. Oh, why are you bringing that up now? You're interrupting me, and
Mhm.
and this isn't a good time, and you know that I'm
Mhm.
tired, and it's like,
Right.
oh my God,
On and on.
on and on and on, and you never get to a resolution ever.
No, but they say just enough of the right words to convince you that you are, but then it flips around again. Like it just is constantly, and that's where the danger of the covert narcissist is. They really can keep you hooked for decades, believing that you're the problem.
Right, right. And then, and then if you're like out the door, that's when they bring you back in and promise things, but then
Hmm.
they always break all their promises.
They do. Yeah, I call that a pseudo recovery where they're like, okay, I understand what you're saying and I'm gonna fix this or I'm gonna be better. And so they kind of go, I also call it the never never land. We go to this place of never never land, which is the abuse just kind of disappears. Like they can be horrible, this 4 hour long berating conversation with you. You go to bed in tears and you wake up the next morning and they're like, hey, what's for breakfast? Like it never happened.
Oh yeah.
And it just kind of dissipates into the air. Well, on the inside, it's still churning all inside of you. But in an attempt to keep peace with them and maybe grateful for a little bit of peace, you kind of let it go to never, never land too. And so you live in this weird okayness where it's so unstable and any type of angry outburst is just a flick away and you're on edge. You're just constantly walking on eggshells, tiptoeing around them, living on the edge. I call this brinkmanship. I talk about that quite a bit because actually a word that my husband taught me in the very early part of our marriage, and little did I know it was going to be my whole marriage. But brinkmanship is where how far can I push somebody before they're going to fall over the edge? So pushing somebody all the way to that point of break and then pulling them back. And then I'm going
Hmm.
to push them again to the point of break and I'm going to pull them back. And when I pull them back, I become the rescuer, by the way. Okay. So I'm going to
Oh yeah.
push them to that edge and then, oh, but I got you. We're good. And we'll pull them back. And that edge gets a little further and a little further each time because you've been, well, she put up with that one. So let me see if I can push a little further. And until you fall off the edge, like you do reach that point of no return where it's like somebody just flipped a switch and you're done.
Oh yeah, because they always overplay their hand. They
Yes.
always overplay their
Yes.
hand because they start to talk about, oh, divorce, I'm divorcing you, I'm this and that and the other thing all the time. Like you're the one who's so horrible, so awful to deal with, all this. And like, because like, what did you do? You didn't do anything, but they're so filled with rage and anger all the
Right.
time.
And perceived threats.
Right. So they have all these perceived threats. And then finally, they just you put they really do push you over that edge. And
Mhm.
then now though, you actually got to that point. You actually started to keep like a journal.
I
Um,
did. Yes. So I had gone to a counselor because I was drowning in all of this. I was so overthinking everything, overanalyzing everything, trying to come up with 100 different ways to say something before anything came out of my mouth, just trying to find the way to say it that it wouldn't offend him or upset him or threaten him. Even if all I was asking is, hey, would you grab milk on the way home from the store? That took a 30-minute dialogue in my head to figure out the right way to say it to him so that he wouldn't get upset. And so I realized like I was drowning, literally drowning in all of this angst inside of me, the anxiety, trying to hold two boys up. We have two kids and I'm trying to help them in all of this. And so I went to a counselor and he's the first one who said to me, hey, you need to explore the word narcissism. And so I went home and I started digging and I came across covert narcissism. Of course, then I jumped down that rabbit hole because it matched. The language matched. And when you read the words of what you've been living for 15, 20, 25 years, you know it. You know when you read the words and go, yes, that's what I've been living. And so I kept running across things that said to start journaling, start documenting, start, writing things down because you can get that brain fog. You can get very confused. Everything. You walk away from a 2 hour conversation and you don't even understand what just happened, what was said, let alone try to remember all the words and everything. So I started journaling, and I started just documenting everything. And I had pages and pages. Like I realized I'd written like 150,000 words on my doc. It was on a Google Docs. The only reason I knew how many words, but I realized how much I had written. And I'm going back and I'm reading through it to get some clarity of, because you start doubting yourself, especially when they get back in that good spot, when they start behaving again.
Mhm.
Then you're like, okay, maybe they're changing, maybe they're, and so you go back and read and you're like, no, this is, it's very eye-opening, and it keeps you grounded,
Yeah.
and you can even, I could look at my own notes and go, okay, well, here's 6 months where he said he was getting help and that this was going to get better. And here's what happened after that. And then here's another spot where there's 3 months of goodness. And this is what happened after. So it keeps you grounded. And then I reached a point where I realized whether he's actually a narcissist or diagnosable narcissist or not, I'm never going to know, but it doesn't matter. I really realized that it didn't matter, that abuse is abuse and abuse is wrong. What mattered was how he was treating me and the boys over and over and over. And so I did write in great big letters at one point, the prosecution rests. And it's
Mm.
like the best 3 words I could have written, because I didn't need any more evidence. I didn't need any more, watching to see what happened or what he was going to do, or trying to dig memories out of my head. I didn't need it anymore. I had enough, and I had reached that point. I was done. And it's like flipping a switch when you really quit taking responsibility for their behavior. Boy, everything changes.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. And you
And
just
so
realized that's it, you're done. And so what happened after that? You moved out, you asked him for a divorce?
Well, so after that point, it actually, there still was a little bit of time before the divorce happened. I needed to get my ducks in a row. And so, like you talk about, in some of the work you do about taking the steps, and so I got strategic about it, and I started taking the steps of, learning about our financial situation, learning what this would look like for my kids, building my own business on the side so that I could be financially independent. And so I just started taking those steps while I was still in the home with him. And healing, by the way, was a huge part of it, as I really dug in on my own healing so that I could be in a better place to handle the divorce process. And so in the home, the interesting part in the home was, when you're in the fight or flight mode in the early part of your relationship, and it's a fight or flight mode because you're under threat. These are emotional threats and psychological threats, but it activates your fight or flight response. And we go into fawning. My fawning response was just to keep him happy so that our marriage would be okay. Well, now I'm in a different place. I know our marriage is not okay. I know it's never going to be okay. And so instead of calling it wasn't fawning so much, but I was willing to gently manipulate the environment to keep things peaceful, because I knew how to do that, so that I could have a peaceful environment where I could heal, where my kids could, start to work on their healing and start to get them, focused on their life going forward. And so I kept the environment peaceful, but it was so that we could live in a peaceful environment,
Hmm.
not to fix marriage anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. That's good.
And I think that's
Um,
a huge distinction, because people get to that point and they're afraid, well, but he's going to think everything's okay again. Well, he might, but I don't care what he thinks anymore. Like, you reach that point where it's not about his thoughts anymore.
and one thing that I thought that was really fascinating is, you had created a really big Facebook group and you had already kind of started this whole process of the work that you're doing now, but you took some space in between. You took some time to really take like what did you call, like, cocooning for your mental health,
Yes,
right?
that's a good word for it. Yeah, Debbie Mirza kind of she coined that phrase.
Yeah, and I thought that was really good.
Yeah.
Because you do have to take time to grieve. It's still like a
Mhm.
death. It's still a sadness. It's still like, it's not like, hey, you were like so glad to get away from this person and you were like, I'm so happy that this thing is done. I mean, it's
Right.
still,
It's a
this
death.
is not what you
Yeah.
wanted. I
Well,
mean,
I thought when the divorce was final that I was going to sing from the rooftops. I thought, oh my gosh, I'm going to be so happy and I'm just going to have this done and over. And I was overwhelmed with grief, with depression, with anxiety, with anger. It was not the emotional soup that I expected. And as I look back at it, it is like you said, it is a death. There's no doubt. It's a death of who I thought he was. It's a death of who I thought I was with him. It's a death of the life that I thought we would live together. But unlike a death, if my best friend, dies in a car accident and I grieve that, the world around me sees that death. So the world around me supports my grieving process. But in this situation, they don't see the death. And so you don't get this immediate support from family and friends around you that you would need for the type of grieving that you're going to need to do.
so good. So, so good. And what advice would you give to somebody who you would say is maybe in a relationship with a covert narcissist now? Because I think that it's people who feel like so paralyzed if they
Mhm.
think that they're in a relationship with a covert narcissist because they think everybody else thinks this person is wonderful.
Yeah. The advice I would give is a couple different facets here. One being, it doesn't matter what everybody else thinks. They're not living with this person. They're not doing daily life with this person. And you need 100% to validate what you think. Your own thoughts and your own feelings matter. And you've been told over and over that they don't, but it is time for you to validate your own feelings. That's the power of journaling. When you start journaling and documenting your own thoughts and feelings about what's going on, then there's a lot of power in that because you are validating that to yourself. And so 100%, I cannot speak it enough, is get on that path of journaling. The other advice I would give is whether you leave or stay in a relationship, that is a very personal decision,
Mhm.
but your healing has got to be a priority.
Yeah.
And as you start that healing journey, and you can do it still in a marriage. I did about 2 years of good healing while I was still in the marriage. Then when I did say it is now time for divorce, and I knew it was coming, but I didn't know when. But when it came, I was so much more ready than I ever would have been 2 years earlier. And so I do strongly encourage people that if you're in a relationship with a covert narcissistic person, to go ahead and get on that path of healing and start the healing. And maybe it saves your marriage and everything works great and wonderful. I wouldn't hang your hat on that. But if you are leaving the relationship, then you'll be in a better place to do it.
Yeah. Oh, so good. And I would also add to that. I mean, everything she just said is exactly 100% correct and totally echo. And I would also say make sure that you have a good support system.
100%. Yes, you're going to need it. You can't go through this alone. You feel alone. You feel isolated, but you've got to find support.
Yeah, because they have isolated you um, um, many times from your support system
Mhm.
because they felt always felt so threatened by anybody
Mhm.
around you. So, start building your support system back before
Yes.
you leave.
Yes. And one of the things that I always tell people is every day, just do the next right thing.
Hmm.
One step, don't look too far down the road. One every day, just do what is the next right thing. Maybe it's to, learn a little bit more about narcissism. Maybe it's to connect with your kids so that your heart can feel a little bit better about how they're doing.
Hmm.
Maybe it's to reach out to an attorney and go ahead and get some questions answered. Maybe it's to learn your financial situation a little bit better. Maybe get some passwords, that you need. Every day, just do one more of the next right step.
Yeah, totally. So good. Where can people learn more about you and what you're up to? And I know you do life coaching and you have a amazing podcast and all that. So where can they learn more about that?
I do. Thank you. And thank you for asking the question. So my main website is covertnarcissism.com. And it's really easy and simple to find. And all of the work that I do is on there. I do run a podcast. That podcast is called Covert Narcissism Podcast. It is growing like crazy. I'm really excited about where it's going and all the things coming down the pipe for that podcast. You can find it anywhere that you listen. Any podcasting platform has that. And I do offer coaching. I am not a therapist, but I do help people recover from covert narcissistic abuse. And so I offer both group and individual programs. You can find all of that information on that website at covertnarcissism.com.
All right. Definitely go check it out. Check out her podcast, which I just recorded to be a guest on. So very excited about that. Go check it all out. And thank you, Renee. Really, really fantastic.
Rebecca, thank you so much for having me here. It's just such a privilege to talk with you.
Thank you. Shopify helps millions sell billions around the world through their digital courses, through their digital products, at the touch of a button, on their smartphones, on social media, however they want, including me. At shop.rebeccazung.com, you can access your store from all over the world, just the touch of a button from your smartphones. Start accepting payments. Everything you need to sell online, manage orders, and develop relationships in one place and look fabulous doing it. Shopify is the commerce platform that is revolutionizing millions of businesses worldwide, including my own, at shop.rebeccazung.com. So right now, what you need to do is sign up for a $1 a month trial period at shopify.com/bestlife, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/bestlife to take your retail business to the next level today. Shopify.com/bestlife.